Good night, Democratic Labour Party family. Good night, Barbados. Good night to those here. Good night to those online. I would admit to having a little bout of jet lag as I came back last night, so I'm still trying to readjust to local time, but I couldn't miss this opportunity for us to come together to praise and to worship and to basically have a moment of family to reflect on the life of Sir Lloyd. I want to start really by admitting, as anyone my age would be able to admit, we did not know Sir Lloyd personally. And there's no point pretending that a millennial like myself would have known him personally. We know Sir Lloyd as a historical figure. We understood his relevance to Barbados. But to say we ever had personal relations with him in that way, that other members will speak in terms of former Prime Minister Stewart and former Minister Jones would not be right. But what I will be able to do this evening is to reflect on his life of service and what that meant for me, and to position that in terms of my own life and the life of persons of my age group. I would start by saying that without Sir Lloyd, there could be no Ronnie Yearwood. Without Sir Lloyd, there could not be many of us here sitting today, for the very simple reason that his work and his life of service established the Barbados Community College. And we often now take it for granted that many of us have access to education, post-secondary school education at a tertiary level, such as community college. But back in the days and back in that time, it was not so easy. There was no access unless you were able to go to a sixth form. And I would say personally, without the Barbados Community College, I would not be the person, I would not be the man, I would not be the person, the leader that I am today. So everything that I am, I owe it to the work, I owe a debt of gratitude to Sir Lloyd, to his efforts in terms of democratizing and equalizing the educational systems of Barbados that persons like myself were able to benefit from. The reality is Sir Lloyd was born in the 30s, just before the riots, just before World War II. I was born in the late 70s, coming into the 80s. The computer wasn't invented when Sir Lloyd was born. Flying wasn't a thing in commercial travel. Commercial travel was a thing in my group. The internet wasn't even a thought. In fact, when Sir Lloyd was born, my mother wasn't even born. So you understand the generational distance, but you also understand that as one generation hands to a new generation, we have to show reverence, we have to gather in moments like these to show service and to honor those who have gone before us. Because we do not know where we're going, we do not know our future unless we understand the past, unless we respect it, and unless we pay homage to those elders who would have set the trail blazing before us. So I could not be here, and I stand on the shoulders of persons like Sir Lloyd. Sir Lloyd would have stood on the shoulders of others before him, and so forth. All generations will stand on the shoulders of the previous generation, and we give service and gratitude for that work and for all that he has done in those areas. I was recently in China, and in fact, all of the efforts and work that Sir Lloyd would have done would have allowed me to be in China. Opening up China to Barbados as its first resident ambassador. That was an important step in developing the relations and developing a new commercial, a new diplomatic partner for Barbados and for the Caribbean. And even after he stopped being Prime Minister, Sir Lloyd sought to serve his country, never thinking that any position or any post was beneath him. And that is a life lived in true service and true honor to others. He was of service to this party, he was service to this country, and he always put what was important for the people of Barbados above all else. We saw that in the 90s, we saw what he did, and essentially he sacrificed himself, he sacrificed everything for what he thought was always for the best of this country. And for that, we also owe him a debt of gratitude. In the mid-90s, amidst all of this crisis, I was probably 13, 14. And I remember people saying, that is the end of Sir Lloyd, that is the end of his career, he'll never be remembered. But, Fidel Castro once said, history will absolve me. And it has absolved Sir Lloyd. In fact, it has elevated him not only as one of the greatest prime ministers and one of the greatest minds of this country, but one of the greatest statesmen of this country. He joins the halls of the titans of this country, and we owe him a debt of gratitude and respect. And it's not just that he joins the halls, it is the way that he did it that is important. He did it without fanfare, he did it without song, he did it without announcements and pronouncements. He just went to work every day, head down, and did the job. I know that Reverend Durant talked about legacy, but the reality is, I do not believe that Sir Lloyd ever set out to have a legacy. And in fact, you are rewarded with legacy when you do not seek legacy. The Bible tells us to humble ourselves, and those who will be last will be first, and those who will be first shall be last. And in many ways, Sir Lloyd lived that life of humbling himself because he never talked about legacy. When I go back and I try to listen to the speeches and the clip-ins, he created a community college probably knowing that it was just going to do good. It was not to build a legacy. When he entered into those agreements with the IMF and right-sized the government for the first time in Barbados, and afterwards it was bloated again, but let's not go into it, it's not about politics today. He didn't do that for legacy. He did that because it was the right thing to do. And that is always what seems to define his life. Everything he did was the right thing to do. It was not trying to chase a dream or a history, thinking, how will history remember me? That is not something to bother about. History will remember you once you have done the work. Once you turn up for the job, once you turn up, you roll up your sleeves every day, head down, head in front of you, and you do what you're supposed to do, the rest will be fine. And I think that is something we have to take for his life, because so many modern politicians, so many people coming into leadership chase legacy. You hear it in their speeches, I'm doing this because I want to build a legacy. The stone is not even turned, the ink is not dried on the policy, haven't a clue how it's going to turn out, but they're talking about legacy. Here you have a man at Sir Lloyd who built credible institutions, who built community college, reformed the entire educational system of Barbados, right-sized the government, put this country on economic growth to the point, and it's been recorded in history. Owen Arthur said he could not have done the things, the economy that he did, unless Sir Lloyd had laid that wicket for him. He admitted that. That is clear for the record to see. But yet, Sir Lloyd never talked about legacy. He never said, I want to be recorded in this way, but that is what legacy is. You are recorded because once you've done truly exceptional work, the rest will take care of itself. And that is something that I think is a lesson for all of us. It is a lesson for my generation. It is for those who chase the memes and the TikToks and the videos and the IG and the ticks and the likes and all the other things that we have in our modern age. It's hard to escape, I understand that, but it is also important to reflect on the life of a man who would have had none of that, who did not bother about what the newspapers said about him, who was not bothered probably what some of his cabinet colleagues thought about him, far less anybody, who was only bothered about what was good for the people of Barbados. I sat in a meeting recently with some folks from China, and I said, and I bring this imagery to you, I said, I sit here and I have 1,000, if you can imagine it, Barbadians behind me. I have my party behind me. So when I speak to you, the only thing that I have in the interest of conversations is what is good for those thousands of imaginary people. I just imagine them there behind me, what is good for them. Because that is what it always has come down to, what is good for the people of Barbados. And I think his life, Sir Lloyd's life, exemplifies that. And on top of that is a lesson that he leaves for me, and is one of family. Because I can see that his children loved him. He clearly loved his children. And in politics, modern politics, sometimes we're told that we cannot have family. We cannot have it because of the busy lives that we lead. Family is not something that you should maintain. But here you have a man who was not only prime minister, ambassador, educational reformer, teacher, scholar, writer, friend, but he was a solid husband and a father. And those are two examples that I take away. If anything else, that leadership and leading is comes down to what you will do with your own family, with your own friends. And if you cannot be a good man and a good husband and a good father, how can you be a good leader? And that is an example that I take from him as I watch him curate his life. And when you reflect on it, the two have to go together. So often our modern politics tells us that we have to be out there doing this, we have to be seen at this place and doing and working up at this party and this fete and all of these things. And his life was nothing of that. His life was one of work and one of family. And that is important for me, and that is something that I think is an example that I take away of how we should live and how we should curate ourselves in public and how we should lead. Importantly, I want to draw a few examples from the good word, because you know that I couldn't leave you without doing such on this occasion. There are so many examples. There are literally hundreds of examples in the Bible of service. But I just want to pull one for you. And this is Philippians, and it says, "Do not look only for your own interests. Take an interest in others too." And that is key, because when you think about Sir Lloyd's life, that is what he did. And further in Philippians, it says, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourself, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others." Many of you have heard me speak before, and I have often said, and I will say it again because Sir Lloyd's life exemplifies it, that sometimes we will labor in the vineyards, we will labor for years, but we may not drink of the wine. And that is what true service represents. Sometimes your labors and your days, the nights and the hours, and you will not taste the fruits of the harvest, because that is not your role, that is not what you've been called to do, that is not your purpose. So Lloyd endured his calling, and in many ways, his premiership ended with him not tasting the fruits of his service and his labor. But later on, history and time allowed him to taste the fruits of his work and his labor. And he saw those fruits manifested all through Barbados, the hundreds of students, the thousands of students who walked through the halls of community college to become the men, the women, the leaders, the titans, the captains of industry, the teachers, the counselors, the lawyers, the priests, the doctors. They all bear his homage. They all reflect and are a reflection of his life of service. I started out by saying I would not be here, and that is no exaggeration, that is just plain fact. I would not be here without the community college, because I grew up in a poor family with a single parent, and there was no way we could afford to send to private school or to go to A-levels after school, or to, at that point, I don't even know if I could have gotten in from Alexandria to Harson's College or Queen's, which were the only offering sixth forms at that time. And furthermore, doing classic traditional subjects that I had no interest in. So not only did community college expand the ability for us to pursue studies, what we often fail to recognize, it expanded the remit and the range that was available to our Barbadians. So no longer were we committed to being classicalists and historians and artists, fine as those things may be, but artists and musicians and cultural industry practitioners and IT specialists and management specialists, and all the range of things that community college offered us that we were never and could never be offered at a sixth form establishment. And we have to recognize the value in that. I know people talk about it, and we talk about it sometimes in a very casual, passing way, but we have to recognize the depth of what his education reforms meant for Barbados and for the new type of Barbados that they were able to create. Because he was able to recognize that the old had to be cast aside to build the new. Not to forget the old, but to recognize that new things and a new way had to come into being, so to create a new generation. Because without Sir Lloyd, therefore this new middle class, and the middle class that we like to boast about and we like to brag about, that built itself and pulled itself up because of education, would not have existed. At least they would not have existed in the same way, because they would not have been provided with the opportunities. And that was only done because here you had a man who was determined to serve. A man who never sought the spotlight. And if the story goes, as I remember, he was teaching, and I think I've heard this, he was teaching at Harrison's College, and literally he got a phone call saying the Prime Minister wants to talk to you. And he's like, what's going on? And that is the nature of the man. Because he was just doing what he normally did, which is to teach. And in so many ways, I have a deep respect for that, because I don't think he ever stopped being a teacher. I don't think that even when he was Prime Minister, he was not being a teacher, because in many ways, that was his calling, that was his purpose. And in many ways, leaders have to teach. We have to lead by example, and we have to lead by word, and we have to lead by deed. And he did both, and he did so in a way that was magisterial, in a way that was above all others. And everyone who has spoken speaks of his humility, but they speak of his ability not to be crass, his ability not to be harsh, his ability to conduct himself in public life with dignity. A dignity that these days, that if it seems that you conduct yourself, you're called soft. You're called unbecoming, because people expect you to sharpen your tongue and to let it loose on the people and to let it loose on your colleagues. And that is not necessary, because Sir Lloyd showed us that there is a different way. There's a way to lead your people. There's a way to do it out of love and humility and respect and kindness. And we need more of that kindness. We need more of that gentleness within our politics, because that is what our country above all needs. It needs love. And if we can draw anything from his example and his life, it is one of service, it is one of humility, and it is one of love for our country. I think he saw the party as a vehicle, as a way to uplift the country. And the country always came first. And that is something that we have to understand. It is something we have to value. We always have to put this country above ourselves, above our own ambitions, above everything that we want. Because at the end of the day, we have to do what is best for those little boys and girls who one day will grow up to lead this country, who will look to this party, who will look to the people of this party as an example of what they should. An example of how to live a life in goodness, how to live a life in service, and how to live a life for others. Because that is the only way that we will have a chance, if we do believe, to enter the eternal kingdom, where we will dwell with our Father, and we will have a chance to dine at the table and sit and eat out with all the angels and all the saints forever and ever, forever, evermore in our lives. Because to do otherwise is not to live a life of service, is not to live a life that is of value to others, to value to your family, because that is where we start. You start by being a good husband and a good father, and when you are a good husband and you're a good father and a good friend, you can be a good leader. You can be that good neighbor. And in so many ways, Sir Lloyd was that good husband, that good father, that good friend, that good neighbor, and that good leader. And I will leave you with this one little example of scripture. They should never give me the mic when it comes to an example where I get to speak scripture, but I will leave you with this one example. He sat down and he called the 12 disciples over to them, and realized I'm just going to paraphrase here, realized he only had 12 disciples. He could have chosen 100, 50, 1,000, just 12, only 12. And said, whoever wants to be the first must take last place and be the servant of everyone else. The greatest among you must be a servant. But those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Matthew 23:11. And in Sir Lloyd's life, we saw someone who basically started last and ended up first. We saw someone who was humbled and therefore was exalted. We saw someone who did not chase legacy, who did not chase history, who did not chase time, who served his family, who served his party, and who served his country, and who did so in a way that is an example to all of us here today. So let me end by saying, so Lloyd, may you fly with the angels, and may you be a blessing always to this party, and may we seek you for your wisdom, even in your afterlife and even the place that you have gone on to serve. May you continue with your words and with all your inspirations to provide us with an example of what service is like. We thank God for you. We thank your family for loaning you to us. And may you forever, evermore, and may your family forevermore be blessed. Because this party has truly been honored and blessed to have had you as its leader, as its servant, as its friend. Thank you.